This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Atom Audio, Isotope, Native Instruments, Lewitt, and Grace Design. You're hearing my voice right now on the new Lewitt Ray microphone with Aura, Auto Gain, and EQ mode through the Grace Design M201 Mark II mic pre, mixed through Isotope, Voice Enhancement Assistant RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
I have to crank out 2 songs a day to keep up with the schedule. There's those times where you're like, you maybe don't know what to do with yourself, but you want to make music. Make an instrumental track, make it as compelling and as good as you can, and just keep making them. Because one day you may be able to get yourself into a library order and you'll already have some done.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Look, if you're like me, then you love having cool instruments in your studio, right? No matter what style of music you make, Native Instruments gives your studio all the instruments and sounds you need, from drums, loops, and beats to the coolest synthesizers, realistic strings, guitar amps, and futuristic synth pads. I love recording and tracking real bands in my studio, but then adding awesome overdubs from Contact, Massive X, Super 8, Battery, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid Keys, for example. Use the code ROCK10 now to get 10% off, or get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples, all over at nativeinstruments.com. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much closer to professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools, and the best part is that these mixing techniques work for you in any DAW, whether you're on Logic, Cubase, Studio One, Reaper, anything you can think of. If you're ready now to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Mark Rudin, an accomplished artist, producer, and songwriter with a masterful command of multiple instruments, particularly horns. His song Miracle was a winner on season 2 of the NBC show Songland, and his work has been featured in major ad campaigns for brands such as Grey Goose and Simple Mills, as well as trailers for the Tom and Jerry movie and the movie Easter Sunday. Mark's newest release, That Looks Good on Me, featuring Kong, is out now, and we have a playlist of his fantastic sounding music and discography in the show notes of this episode, Rockstar. So please scroll down and click on that. Maybe, after you listen to the podcast, and check out all the music that we're talking about, because it's some really, really great stuff. Thank you, and a big shout out to our buddy Rodger Allen Nichols for making our introduction. Rodger has also been a guest on the podcast multiple times, Rockstars, so check out those episodes. Please welcome Mark Rudin to Recording Studio Rockstars. Mark, are you ready to rock, dude?
Ready to rock.
Good to have you here, man. It's really nice to meet you. Tell us where you're joining us from.
I am currently in Salt Lake City, Utah. Yes. Beautiful.
Right on. Salt Lake City. I visited there once. I think I was on a family trip out west, and I just remember a very big salty lake.
You saw the lake?
Yeah, and well, and also we went skiing in Park City, Utah, which I guess is pretty close to that.
Yes, it's very
Yeah,
close. Less
and
than
I
a half
remember
hour.
there were weird bylaws, like if you wanted to go have dinner at a restaurant and have a drink, you had to like pay $10 and join a drinking club or something like that, so that you were legally allowed to have a mixed drink with your dinner.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, I guess I've peeked at the lake a couple times. It's not really the most common thing out here, but it is named after it. So it's I'm sure if you're just traveling through, it's something worth seeing. But yeah, and the drink laws are hilarious. But I love it out here. I moved here from California. So
Oh, you did? Okay,
yeah.
cool. So you were in LA, sort of cutting your teeth there. And
Yep.
do you feel like yours, I mean, we'll get more into this, but do you feel like yours is sort of a classic story of go put in your time at the hub of music, make the right, build your career to a level, make the right connections, and then you can just take it with you wherever you wanted to go?
Somewhat. I was fortunate enough to be born out there. And so I was born and raised in, suburbs of Los Angeles. Um, I then, when I was 18, I went to University of the Arts, which is in Philadelphia. I lived in Philadelphia for 8.5 years from when I went to college and stayed there. So I had that East Coast, uh, you know, influence, which I had been craving the whole time growing up. And then back
Right.
to
So was that
LA.
like a little bit of the soul thing for as a
Totally.
horn player, the heart of soul music and
Yeah,
stuff?
absolutely. I mean, there was just a totally different set of influences, and it definitely led me in a different direction musically than I would have gone if I had just stayed in California, for sure.
And so tell us, maybe give us the story of how you got interested in music and got to a point now where you're making all this music. I mean, you make music as an artist slash also an artist that is creating for music that can live in film and
Yeah.
television and, sync opportunities and that sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it's been a long journey. I've had many different, eras of my career. I was a touring musician. I worked as a music director for a hotel in Mexico for a while, which was a totally
Wow.
different experience. Yeah, very unique to itself.
And it's just,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry, I'll interject things. So music director means like band leader for stage things too, or just,
No, not that type of music director. I actually ran a music program. It was a very unique. It's called Hotel Gonzo. It still exists. And this was, yeah, a very random thing. But I was brought down there to build and design a recording studio in a boutique hotel in Los Cabos, Mexico.
wow.
And yeah, the owner of the hotel had this concept to build this arts hotel where he featured artists in residence. And for the music side, he wanted a recording studio, and I was recommended to go and literally showed up with a book how to build recording studios because it was one of those things like fake it till you make it type things that I did where I was like, sure,
Yeah.
I'll go. Didn't know what I was getting into, didn't speak any Spanish, and ended up, building in this unfinished basement of a hotel, this big recording studio, and it worked out. And but the music director job was ultimately I stayed, and I would invite artists to come down to be the artists in residence, and I would host them, and I would sort of put on a concert, like produce the concert. I produced a video series called the El Gonzo Sessions. I would, just be there for them. I would sometimes engineer for them. I'd sometimes, get to just play horns on their songs that they were recording while they were there because the recording studio was there. It was an exchange program. It was really cool and a really great opportunity for me to sort of do for a while. I did it for 7 years, and it's a very different side of, I wouldn't even call it the music industry. It was sort of like hospitality, but I was with, great artists constantly throughout the whole period.
And were these students that were coming down there and sort of paying to be part of a course and stuff too, to learn music? Or was it more like professional musicians who come
Yeah.
down there and then you can perform, record,
Well,
and the tourism is who's staying in the hotel?
Um, the tourists were staying in the hotel, but it was world-class artists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would get the biggest and best, most quality artists that I could, get my hands on. And, from being in the music industry, that's what sort of started. I would just invite my friends who I knew would do a great job and appreciate
That's
it.
amazing.
Yeah.
I got a little bit of that experience when I was traveling and ended up in Hong Kong playing in a blues band for a half a year with my brother at the very beginning of my career. And that was my introduction to this world of, combining, in-house bands and musicians and touring to different places. And it was pretty intriguing. It was pretty exciting. When somebody tells you that you can go stay in some tropical place for a week and play music, the answer is often hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
It was a great, position for me to be in, to be able to invite people to do this, and one of the great parts was it really introduced me to Mexican artists, and which was more than half of what I would bring down. But I got to work with a lot of the biggest and best Mexican artists. One of them, Natalia Lafourcade, who she's won multiple Latin Grammys, but she's won also American Grammys for her album that I got to play a trumpet solo on, just randomly, just because she was there. And it was a really cool experience. And and then that sort of ran its course. I was being called back to doing my own music and producing again. And I remember when I was doing the music director gig down in Mexico, I wasn't really creating. I was doing a lot of like capturing, so I would do like capture recordings. There's a video series called the El Gonzo Sessions, and I would literally like mic. It was a live performance in the studio. And so I would, mic up everybody live, hit record, and run in with a camera and film it and put that together. And so that was like my, my artistic production that I was doing at that time. And I eventually started, really being called back to make music again. And I had, before I was doing the music director gig in Mexico, I was a touring musician. I knew that I didn't want to go back to touring. I knew I didn't want to go back to that sort of, hired gun type gig. And so I wanted to be home. I wanted to be making music. And at the time, I really didn't know what I wanted to make. I sort of started because I wasn't in the industry at that point. I took my stab at like pop songwriting and trying to get into that world. This is previous to the Mexico job, but that's a tough world and it's very competitive, and it just wasn't really something that clicked for me. So being a horn player, that was my first instrument, was trumpet. I decided, okay, well, I'll go back to taking trumpet lessons, and I contacted the principal trumpet of the LA Phil and started studying again. I'm like, I'm just going to get back into playing the horn and maybe I'll make some trumpet music. And so,
right. So you'd be at home on a classical stage in an orchestra too?
Yes, I could pull my weight in classical, but I was more jazz trained. I'm as a trumpet player, I fit in best as well, in any jazz situation, lead trumpet, soloing, pop, I was always doing horn sessions. Even at that point, I had already played on a number of records. So I was more into like studio horn, like studio trumpet playing, like for artists and things like that. Yeah. So.
Yeah. You'll probably appreciate that this interview will come out just a couple away from my interview with Steve Genowick, who just remixed Miles Davis' Kind of Blue in Atmos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty cool record to have on your discography.
Yeah,
right?
And that it wasn't Kind of Blue, but it was like the essence of Miles Davis, and the first track of it was So What, which is on Kind of Blue. And that's the first jazz recording I ever heard. And I only heard it because, I got a trumpet when I was in the 6th grade, getting into beginning band. And my mom took me to Tower Records, and that was the only person that she knew in the jazz world. They played the trumpet. She's like, get a Miles Davis. And so I got like a best of. And yeah, so I mean, that that album ultimately is I mean, for everybody, but it's definitely something that influenced me very early on. Yeah. That's very cool that he got to like remix it in Dolby Atmos.
Yeah. Now, so you're a big fan of bebop and that genre of jazz as well.
Yeah. Once I started, playing the trumpet, it was on, and in terms of like, I never even considered doing anything else. I was all through middle school, high school. I was just planning on being a professional trumpet player. And, I didn't have like early musical influences via my parents or siblings or anything like that. I didn't have like a lot of, before I started playing music, it was, Weird Al Yankovic and The Simpsons Sing the Blues and like whatever, like
Weird Al.
Yeah. Home. I can definitely credit him.
He was one of my first favorites too.
Yeah. First musical influence by far,
I don't know if we're how close we are in age or not, but I used to listen in the 80s, early 80s, I'd listen to the Dr. Demento show on the radio. And, at the end of the night on a Sunday night, they'd play the countdown of the Funny Five. And like, Weird Al would always be like number 1 or way up there.
Yeah.
His latest was.
Yeah, no, I remember, I listening to him and just laughing. I went to his concert like maybe 4 years ago or 5 years ago. I went to a Weird Al show at the Greek Theater, and I didn't expect it, but I was just crying, laughing the whole time. I mean, it was so good. It was so hilarious. But yeah, I mean, so when I started listening to, when I started playing music, I started listening really well. And yes, I listened to bebop and jazz, and I sort of came into music a little bit backwards. I wasn't even listening to any, I never listened to the Beatles until I was like 18. And I was, from jazz, it was like, okay, what music has horns in it? And that led to Steely Dan, Earth, Wind and Fire, James Brown, and then into, by the time I was in college, I was in jazz school in Philadelphia. Everybody's like, what are you listening to? You listening to Coltrane or Sonny Rollins or something like that. And I had already listened to a lot of that, I'm like, no, I listened to the Beatles and Bob Dylan, because I'm just discovering them, And,
right on.
So that got me into that type of music. And yeah, so, going back to where I'm at now as a producer, I was being called back into music, and I got a new DAW, I got a new computer. I just set myself up to start making music again, and was just, trying to put together tracks and start things. And I really didn't know what I was ultimately trying to make or where I was going to land. And a buddy of mine hit me up, and I don't just play the trumpet, I play trumpet and trombone and saxophone and flute. And so
right on.
He, someone that I had just newly been introduced to via my partner, Allie, and it was her friend. And he's like, "Oh man, like you should come over since you play the horns. You should come over. We should do a song together." And I was already a songwriter. I'd experienced writing and being. Writing lyrics and writing top lining for music and stuff like that before. And I had some credits. But he's like, you should come over and we can write a song together and do it for sync. And since you play the horns, I have this idea. I want to make an EP of songs that are just all different versions of Uptown Funk. Not like literally different versions, but like that could be like, a substitution for Uptown Funk, because at the time, this was 2018, that was like what every supervisor was looking for. And that, those horn breaks and stuff like that are still to this day very useful in advertising and things like that. And so
totally.
I went over, brought my horns, we wrote a song. There was three of us. There was a vocalist, top liner there as well, but all three of us contributed to the songwriting. And then of course we put heavy horns on it. And within this doesn't usually happen, but within a few months, that song was placed in a television show, and I was just like, "Wow, this is awesome." I had sort of experienced the sync business passively before. It wasn't my first licensing placement, but I had never just like tried to make something for licensing and then have it just work out like that.
Atom Audio's S-Series, crafted in Berlin, is a flagship line of reference monitors featuring 5 models from the compact S2V all the way up to the powerful S5H. The range builds on Atom Audio's iconic heritage with new technology for improved acoustic performance. With new woofers, redesigned waveguides, and a DSP engine, the S-Series ensures accurate frequency response, consistent dispersion, enhanced detail, and a forward-looking digital connectivity. Backed by a 5-year guarantee, Atom Audio monitors embody durability and professional sound for your studio at atomaudio.com. Do you feel like part of that was that you guys were so nimble and quick to put together a song that was,
the guy that I was working with,
in the moment?
Yeah, the guy that I was working with was already in that industry. That's his main source of income. That was his main thing. So it was him that really like led us to have like a perfect product for that, and it just showed like, oh, okay, like not only can you like sit down and intentionally make a song for this type of purpose, for licensing or for sync. And for those of you who don't know, like sync is short for synchronization. It's just simply a substitute, a word we use for the industry because the music is being synced to like any type of video format that you can imagine, whether it be TV or advertising or promos or video games and, anything, There's opportunities and the music needs to be licensed for that. And you get a licensing fee, which is upfront money, and then you can collect royalties on that as well. And, with the way that things had been going and are continuing to go in the actual music industry, in the streaming world and in, mechanical royalties, it's just like, wow, no, this is like an actual way to make money while I'm, making music from my house. So I was just like, I'm in. This is it. This is like my direction. It literally just turned on a light bulb, became my North Star, and I was like, I'm gonna just make music for this, And so I immediately had a focus and started working on it like that.
I like that. I like those metaphors. Turned on a light bulb and became my North Star.
Yeah.
Do you so speaking of which, as a songwriter, you have to write a variety of stuff. We got a lot of questions around that, and I've got some great questions in from Rodger, and Nichols too, who introduced us. But there's an element of songwriting, especially if you're going to use lyrics, where it's like, okay, what are we singing about? Mm-hmm. So, how you talk a little bit about that? I mean, what are some of the ways that you decide this is what the song's going to be about, like turn on a light bulb, follow your North Star kind of thing? And are there lyrics that will begin a song? I guess there's a lot of questions around this. Maybe I'll just start with one. How is this similar or different to just writing a song for yourself as an artist?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's something that you do need to focus on and at the same time have a level of not caring, because when you're writing for sync, a lot of artists I would work with me because I was getting a lot of placements, but they wanted to get more in the sync world. And it's like, okay, there's some ground rules, like we can be creative and abstract, but we do have to have like a real good sort of bumper sticker, which I call it, like title and direction. Like you have to know what we're talking about, for the most part. And that can be difficult because you use so many metaphors in songwriting and stuff like that. And you always want to, lyrics are tough. Lyrics is where you're like trying to be cool, and it's like you don't want to, you can, if you're not trying to be cool, you can easily fall into being cheesy, and it's like you just can't be like happy, positive, same like, sort of stock lyrics over and over. You have to find some way within this being somewhat deliberate, knowing what you're talking about. Like it has to be clear what the song is about, what you're saying. Especially like leading up to the chorus and the chorus itself.
Right. So like one of the tracks in your discography is a song called Knock 'Em Down.
Mm-hmm.
And I clicking over, I think on your YouTube or your Instagram, which also we have those links in the show notes, Rockstar. So you should check out some of the ways that Mark is letting the world know about the music he's making, because sometimes, the movie lets the world know about the movie, and the music might just be in there as this background or something. And it's so you as an artist might have to go out of your way to let everybody know that that's the song you made for the movie too, right?
Yeah.
But Knock 'Em Down, was with the hockey film, right? What was that? The Mighty Ducks,
the Mighty
or something
Ducks.
like that.
Yes, and it's also been used in. It was used in Hard Knocks, which is the HBO series about football. It was used in a NCAA football promo as well. And
so it's like there's the obvious connect of a lyric and
absolutely
a use case, right?
And as we were writing that, we were envisioning this working in exactly those situations. It's like, I didn't know they were going to remake Mighty Ducks, but if that was out, I'm like, man, this song, if it doesn't make it in the Mighty Ducks show, I don't know what will,
Were you thinking that somebody was going to release a Guinness Book of World Records? Now I'm going to blank on what they call them. The little rectangles. They're made out of ceramic with the dots on them, and you stack them all up and then you push one down. The dominoes.
Oh yeah.
They're going to do the world's biggest domino fall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that if anything, we were, and often I think of the NFL because they use so much music, NFL, like you think of Monday Night Football, it's such a production. It is so much like happening. There's music like happening every, commercial break, every time they show the scoreboard, it's so there's a lot of licensing opportunities in NFL. So I think we were just thinking of that, and for it to have ended up in Hard Knocks and, for me, like there's different levels of how a good licensing placement, or it's never bad, if you're making money getting your music in something, it's never bad. But sometimes like you could barely hear it, or sometimes it's like,
right,
why did they even use that song? It's like getting in the way of the dialogue. It doesn't fit at all, but I'm not complaining. In that case, it was like they used the whole song and it couldn't have fit better. And it was really cool. When I see it used really well, that's when I also get really excited. Other than making money, I get really excited about seeing how well it's used or how integral it is to the visual.
So let me ask this question about that, with regards to making money or a measurement of the success of a song that's written for sync. Is it better if it gets used in its entirety and it connects and it just makes perfect connection to the film or the video or whatever? Or does it not matter at all, and like something that gets stripped of the vocals and they just use the instrument and blah, blah, blah can be considered just as successful? How should we think about that sort of thing? I mean, it sounds like you're describing it as very successful, but I wonder if there's more to tell about that process.
Yeah, I've had like every situation. I've had situations where they've only used the instrumental. and situations where they, used the lyrics, and the lyrics were used to drive the story, or in best cases, the commercial. Commercials is really where the money's at. If you can land an advertisement, there's a commercial for Simple Mills crackers that used my song that I did with an artist named Ryan Innes. The song's called "Nothing Can Stop Me," and
from eating all the crackers.
Yeah, I mean, it was just it was one of those songs where, to be honest, we were just trying to write something that would work for sync. I definitely did not imagine it being in a cracker commercial or anything like that. And sometimes, like, going back to talking about lyrics, sometimes you have like a section, like the pre-chorus, right, where you will write I just use this as a term, the dumbest lyric. And that just means simple, like, it's like, oh, okay, let's just go na na na. Or let's just, say, I can feel it now, and just repeat it, and that's it. Whatever, I can't remember what the pre-chorus to that one is. But when we saw the commercial, they used that dumbest part, like, as the featured part, and
Right.
It worked so well. And they've renewed it now for 3 years, and which is like literally, I think the best case scenario in the sync world is when you get a commercial that has renewals in the contract, and every year they renew it, and you get paid all over again. And then
I had an experience like that too. There was part of a production team, we shared in master use and copyright with the artists we were working with. And there was a song that we did that it got picked up by a French perfume company. I remember that it was like kind of had a little bit of a jaw-dropping moment for what was paid for the first year, and then they renewed it, and it's like, wow, that again, so it's cool to hear that that's still the case. I mean, for me, that was back in 2005.
Yeah, it's still the case, and it's the best case, because not only do they renew it, you get paid again, but there's a 5% increase, which compounds each year. So you get 5% on the 5% from the year before. And yeah, it's great. But yeah, I mean, like, to sort of wrap up on the lyric thing, it's you have to sort of push yourself through it. Just be like, okay, this works, and then go back and edit. It's like, okay, I call it the cheese flag. Like, okay, this my cheese flag just went off. Let's twist this line so it's cool. Like, this is too cliche. This line is too cliche. How can we twist it? How can we change one or two words to make it something you haven't heard before, or say it in a way you haven't heard before, or something like that? And it's a very fun thing to do, and it's not difficult. It's fun. It's definitely a part of the process that's really important, And then on the other hand, you don't want things to be like too dark or too
heartbreak.
Yeah,
unless it's
a song about heartbreak. And sometimes they're like, hey, we need a song about heartbreak, and it's like, I think that's the advice, almost, that I'd give. It's like, whatever your direction is on this song, whatever your concept is, you have to stay with it. So if you're going to write a happy song, it has to be happy all the way through. If it's going to be a dark song, it has to be dark all the way through. It can't be,
right.
You can't really mix, you want it to be exactly what it is, so that there's no question. And then you also want to consider each section as usable, like, okay, this verse could be used in a license on its own. This pre-chorus could be used in a license on its own. This chorus could be used in a license on its own. So you really just want to that's giving the editor what they want, lots to work with,
Now, what if it's a song about Dracula finding true love? Do you get, is there much room? Is it helpful to find contrast in things sometimes, where it's like there's something dark mixed with something happy, or vice versa?
Yes,
Or is that the
definitely.
good
And
example of don't do that?
let's just say if you could write a good song about Dracula, then when you get a Halloween search, you got something to pitch, you know? It's like the bit it's a numbers game. You know, a lot of
Yeah.
people will say that, but it is true. You want to have a very robust catalog. And sometimes, you know, it's like it's good to have like a song. I wrote a song called "The Devil's Office," you know, which I thought would work great for like the show Lucifer. It hasn't been placed yet, but when people are looking for something where there's like mentioning the devil, it's like I have something to pitch, you know.
What about
And
when is The Office going to do a Halloween episode?
yeah, exactly.
That ought to do it.
It would work in that maybe, you know? And so you never know, you know? It's like, I thought, you know, there is that show Lucifer. So it's like, okay, there's a real case scenario where they need songs probably mentioning the devil, you know?
Yeah. Well, The Devil's Haircut worked for Beck.
Totally. And you hear that song, you know, in licensing often, you know?
Right. Totally. Totally. All right. Well, so let's rewind a little bit on the lyric thing, because I do think this is fascinating. Knock 'em down. No, I can't stop. I forgot exactly how you phrased it.
Nothing can stop me.
Nothing can stop me. Awesome. When you have these catchphrases, what are some of the things that do seem appropriate to mix up in the verses or to avoid in the verses? How do you go a little bit somewhere else, but not too far away? Which is my guess is maybe that's how you think about it.
I like to think of verses as their own hook, you know? So,
Right. You just said it needs to be usable on its own as
yeah,
well.
exactly. So how can I, you know, find something that I call them bumper stickers, you know? I mean, it's like once you have a bumper sticker, once you have the idea, okay, this song is Knock 'em Down, like what are some other little hooks that you can come up with that are relatable to that title, you know? Or vice versa, you know, maybe you will just start with a verse. Um, but it's not that common. Usually, you do need a concept before you can just start writing a verse, you know, because you could just end up feeling like you're going nowhere.
Yeah. I got roots so strong. You know, now you're getting picked up for all the gardening commercials.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's about finding something hooky. Sometimes it's like, you know, I use tricks, you know, like I'll just say like, okay, we need to fill up 4 measures, right? What if we just go, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, let's do this right now, you know, or something like that. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a cheesy
Yeah.
lyric, but like, it's also how you follow it up, you know, that will take it away from the cheesiness, you know? So it's like little tricks, like, and that makes it a hook, you know, the part where you're just going, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. It could be very like that could be all they need, you know, in a licensing situation, you know,
Yeah,
or
it's the
exactly
EDM
what they're
build up
looking
before the
for.
big bass drop.
Something like that, you know, it's always that repetitiveness is very handy, you know, to be repetitive without being obvious or you know, you know, we're trained musicians, so find some way to mess with the rhythm so that it's you know, syncopated and cool, you know, and things like that.
Hey, Rockstar, come on over here. I've got a secret to tell you. Want to know how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of recording studio rock stars? Well, my secret is using Isotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar to make this podcast sound great. Right now, you are hearing RX Breath Control, Declick, Declip, DS, Deplosive, Voice Denoise, Ozone Multiband Compression, Neutron EQ, and Limiting, all from Isotope. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off over at isotope.com. Okay, so now on the other side of lyrics is the song, the music, and the style and stuff like that. So talk a little bit about the process for you of arriving at a style, because some of the songs in your discography are obviously stylistic. Like there is stuff that reminds me of Uptown Funk a little bit. there's Tequila Nights, and what was the other one? Open Road, maybe. That it's, Tequila Nights is like Ennio Morricone, like spaghetti Western kind of vibe going on. Open Road, I might mix up titles here, excuse me, but I think Open Road with Bermuda Dunes was the one that reminded me of Western meets surf song, which I guess is written in the title, Bermuda Dunes, the artist.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Tequila Nights, I should just quickly mention, there's three sort of categories in the licensing world. There's sync, there's custom, and there's library. Tequila Nights was actually a library song that I did for Bleeding Fingers Library, which is Hans Zimmer's company. Hans Zimmer's, sorry.
Hans Zimmer's, yeah.
Hans Zimmer's company. And they released it, and it ended up, populating my Spotify and everything like that. But it's cool. I'm glad they released it. I've done hundreds of those things. Library is a little bit different.
It's called Bleeding Fingers? That was the name?
Bleeding Fingers is Hans Zimmer's company. Yeah.
Love it.
And so that is more of an assignment. That is like, I think they were doing a Tex-Mex, I think it's called. I think it was called. Yeah. They're like, okay, we need Tex-Mex library stuff. And library songs is basically, they're shorter. They're usually 2 minutes long. A lot of times instrumental. Although I've done a lot of library with lyrics too. But they're doing a buyout. They're just like, okay, we're buying this off you. You get your royalties. But whoever Bleeding Fingers was working with, they'll be working with some different networks or something like that. It's in their library. It's almost like royalty-free music for them to use in a sense,
right.
Like the editors just have things to pick from. So that's where Tequila Nights came from. And then Open Road, I was working with Bermuda Dunes. It's a pen name for the artist I was working with, Matt Adams. And I can't remember what it was. Oh, no, I do, actually. We really wanted to try and make a car commercial, like something that would work in a Toyota truck commercial or something like that, or a Ford F-150 commercial and stuff. And so that's why, it's like On This Open Road, and that's where you start. I do a lot of homework. You asked about how I come up with a style and a track and these ideas. And it almost always starts with a track. And so I'll go to different licensing agencies, websites. Like there's some really big licensing agencies, like for example, Zinc Music, Secret Road, Position Music. And I'll go to their websites and I'll go through their works because they post all of their different placements on there. And there'll be 100 or more to choose from. And I'll try and stick to like what's recent, what their recent works are. And I just started listening for themes in the genres or in the production and stuff like that. And I will sort of use that as a starting point in a lot of cases. If it's a combination of that and the artist that I'm going to work with. So if I'm going to work with an artist, because I do have songs. There's a song called Every Time I Open My Eyes, which I did 100% myself. And I'm singing on it. But most of the time, I'm working with people that I think have great voices and can write lyrics and top line along with me. And I'll do the production, the track, and the mixing and all that.
Yeah, so a great voice is probably pretty key in this stuff. You don't want the voice to be a distraction from the song.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I have sang on my own songs, but I just want them to be able to sing better than I can.
Well, and it's what's interesting about that too is it's a different way of thinking when you're just sort of solo artist thinking, where you're like, I'm just trying to get me out there.
Yeah.
When you start writing for this stuff, you might just think, I just want this song to be great. And it's kind of old school production too. I mean, there's a lot of, famous music producers, 50s through the 1970s and everything, all the way to the present, which, who will assemble singers and songs and producers and, make a track to just be a hit on its own. I mean, I'm going to be visiting Fame Studios pretty soon to do some interviews. And Rick Hall, I think that was when he started Fame down in Alabama. That was sort of the model for making music, was just get a great song, get a great singer, put a band in there, make a record, and the record itself is a hit.
Absolutely. And a good voice just does so much. It's like, there's certain people who are just born to sing, and their voice, and it's effortless. And, for me, it is a real difficult task to try and get some vocals done for me, that I'm happy with. But like, you're working with someone who's a singer, a sanger, and yeah, I mean, you don't have to do much. The song just comes together as soon as their voice gets on it,
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it starts with the 5-minute vocal warm up, and now we're going to do the hum.
I still do that one. Yeah.
So, all right. So let's see here. Tequila Nights. The horns and the instruments have a great quality to the sound too. Talk a little bit about how you recorded / mixed that stuff in order to get that kind of old school quality to it that makes it sound appropriate stylistically. Did you break out, cool? Just even looking at your Instagram and your YouTube, you're clearly like DAW and plugin savvy. You're not afraid to go places.
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about that, about getting those. How do we make our sounds sound like ye olden sounds?
Yeah. So I do all my production in Ableton. Not that has anything to do with what you asked, but just to predicate that.
It's awfully good for loops. I know that.
It's just, to me, like Ableton is just like it's like working on a big empty canvas, and it's just so easy to move things around and take a loop and just put it exactly where you want it, drop it in. It's already at the tempo. It's very easy. I'm a big drag and drop guy.
Can you feel that way for vocals in Ableton also?
Yeah, I know. Once I started doing the drag down style of vocal tracking, where you'll have like maybe you have like a vocal group with some tracks, and then a record track, and you just drag it into it, as opposed to the playlist style, which I sort of do a hybrid now that Ableton offers playlists. I just, no longer would switch to Pro Tools for vocal tracking. I just was like, okay, I've got it. And
it's cool to hear you describe that style of recording vocals, because I do that a lot too.
Yeah.
I'll do that when I'm recording myself. I'll do that when I'm recording other people. It's just makes it handy. It's like got this work track at the top, and then everything else is already like pre-mixed with effects and panned and everything. You just drag these bits down to these tracks until you have your full stack of vocals.
And I don't just do that with vocals. I'll do that with every instrument. I do that with the horns. I do that with guitars, bass. There's always a record track, and that way it's just so easy to keep moving and just like, oh, okay, I'm up to here now, and just, let me continue on, like I messed that part up, but this was good up to here. Let me just drag this good part down and just keep going, instead of like punching it in or trying to set up some kind of punch or something,
So I kind of cut you off as you were explaining how you got that.
How you get the old sound. Yeah. So, I credit having listened to so much of that stuff, first of all, like, because that sound is in my head. I'm not really trying too hard to figure out what it should sound like. It's just like when it gets there, I know it's there. And so the plugins that they offer these days to make things sound old are great, and it's really comes down to tape saturation. The UAD Studer tape machine is great for that. RC20 is probably still my most used plugin. I use the Aberrant DSP cassette. What's it called? Cassette?
Sketch cassette.
Sketch cassette. I just drag that stuff on there and just tweak it until it does what I want it to do. I have
Is the RC20, is that one of those Native Instruments plugins?
The RC20 is XNL Audio.
XNL Audio.
Yeah, they're the ones that make Addictive Drummer. They make Addictive Keys, and but Addictive Drums are probably the drums on that track, because I don't track drums. I have a drum set in the other room, but I don't mic it up. And what I'll do is I'll, I have a lot of different sounds, and I can write for drums. You know what I mean? Like, I know what they should be playing, and I can hear it, and I play a bit, so I kind of have that idea. But so when I use something like Addictive Drummer, I'll just I'll edit the parts so it's exactly as I would think a professional drummer would play it. And then sometimes some things are hard to get right, like, for example, hi-hats. So I'll just go grab my hi-hat, bring it in, and just play it myself. Or if
and the Bee Gees.
Yeah. I mean, I heard about that from like the Fleetwood Mac, that on Rumors that all his tom fills are like recorded separately, and that they record, like, that's the first time I heard about, like, oh yeah, drums being tracked separately for like more of a pristine audio effect. And so, I did hear like recently about how they put together Staying Alive and things like that. And they did some of that stuff. But yeah, I'll grab the hi-hat. If I want a fill on a tom, I'll just bring my tom in and I'll play it. Or if I want, one of the hard things to do is you want that ghost note on the snare. If you're doing like a beat like that, and I'll just like, just kind of like play the regular part on my leg and hit those ghost notes, and things like that.
So you'll do the ghost note, you'll do the snare and hit all the ghost notes, but like the actual backbeat snare hit will just be on your leg or something to get it out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll use a sample because it's just going to sound better,
That's great.
For the backbeat, for the main kick, I've never brought the kick in here, It's like there's too many good kick drum samples and
that are consistent.
And sound great. And I mean, like when I'm in a studio and I hear great playback of a well-recorded kick drum, I still think that's just, I give a lot of props to any engineer that can get great kick drum sounds, because it's so rare that they sound good recorded, it's just with all the punch and warmth that you want. Yeah. So
Addictive Drums is the one that you use a lot?
Addictive Drums I find very handy. And you just learn to mess with velocities and samples, and you can do a lot in there. And then, I'm never like lazy about this stuff. I will make, I'll separate it all so I could still mix it as like a drum set, instead of it just being in there and it being in their interface and everything like that. Like, I still do everything I have to do to be able to isolate the sounds so that I can mess with them and treat them how I want them to be.
It's interesting. Mixing drums from the multi-tracks, sometimes that can be the solution to getting the drums to sound really great. And sometimes I feel like the solution is you need to hear that you reveal that it was challenging to get those drums to sound great, and that can actually be the drum sound. Especially on some older recordings, right? It's like it shouldn't sound too hi-fi sometimes, right?
That's right. Yeah. No, you don't want it to like be, it sound like it was recorded in a, in a clean room or something,
Right.
You do want that. You do need that, for it to sound like a real drummer or real people playing, real ensemble. You definitely need that room sound, and how you create that is, with plugins a lot of times. And again, XNL Audio has a lot of RC20 by XNL Audio. It has a lot of parameters in there that are just useful to help make that happen. Filters, it's got a space knob on it, which is really just like a room reverb. And like I have this thing, it's sitting right here. I don't know if you've ever seen these. This is the SOAS, what's it called? It would sit, Lander. And it's basically like a cloud lifter, but it just it'll turn this mic, I'm talking into a SM7 here, into like an old tube mic, and I might use that to record the horns or the acoustic guitar. I think on that, like going back to Tequila Nights, you listen to it, you hear that acoustic guitar is like super grainy and stuff. And I probably used that to track the acoustic guitar, so it had that crunch.
So do you find then, as far as microphones go, do you find it more useful to have like one versatile mic like an SM7 that you can just treat differently in different situations, or do you really like to have a whole collection of mics in your studio?
Yeah, no, I mean, up until recently, I had this SM7 and I had a blue Dragonfly, which is just like an $800, sort of just standard large condenser microphone, no tube or anything. And I had to record everything on that and just make it work, and so I find that if you can get a good level and everything, then you can use plugins and make really whatever sound you want, and then if you mix it right, you can really make it sound as hi-fi or lo-fi or anything as you want. I recently did get a tube mic, which is it's this guy. It's I don't know if you could see it.
Oh yeah,
it's Vanguard V13, which is incredible. I mean, for the price, and you always say like for the price, but it's just an incredible tube mic. And it wasn't. I was about to buy like a Neumann and spend $6,000, but I only had. I got this for like less than $1,000, I think. And it did make, once I was like, oh, tube mics, that now I get it, and it did like really elevate some of the things that I track, and it made a lot of things sound better. But it doesn't take away from what I recorded previously on just the Dragonfly and made work and made sound how I wanted it to sound ultimately, and so like.
Well, I think one of the cool things about sort of building your mic locker one mic at a time is it gives you a chance to just simply live with each mic for a minute and get familiar with it and discover what all these cool sounds are. What do songwriters, music producers, DJs, EDM, TV, and film composers all have in common with you and me? We all need incredibly cool sounds that instantly transport the music we are creating to the style that we want. This is why Native Instruments is your ultimate toolkit with a massive library of sounds for your studio. Whether you want to create hip-hop, indie pop, classic rock, meditation music, pumping dance floor beats, or full orchestral arrangements, Native Instruments' Complete Bundle offers you everything you need, from drums, loops, and beats to wild synths, ultra-realistic strings, and vintage electric bass, guitars, and keys. The list goes on and on. I personally love recording real bands in my studio and then adding cool drum samples, synths, and futuristic keys from Battery, Contact, Massive X, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid keys, for example. Plus, it's a great way to make your production sound modern and unique. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off or get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples over at nativeinstruments.com. The S Series by Atom Audio, crafted in Berlin, is a flagship line of reference monitors, blending advanced engineering and in-house design. With 5 models in various sizes and configurations, these monitors build on Atom Audio's iconic heritage while incorporating new technology for improved acoustic performance. The range includes the compact S2V with the 7-inch woofer, the 3-way S3H with twin 7-inch woofers, the vertical S3V with a single 9-inch woofer, and the powerful S5H and S5V main monitors featuring a 12-inch woofer and exceeding 131 dBSPL per pair. Despite differences in size and power, all these models provide highly analytical sound for professional audio applications. The S Series includes new woofers, mid-range drivers, redesigned waveguides, and a DSP engine for crossover optimization. The result is accurate frequency response, consistent dispersion, enhanced detail in bass and mid-frequencies with wider frequency ranges, and forward-looking digital connectivity, all in a durable design. The S Series ensures longevity in your studio, backed with a 5-year guarantee at atomaudio.com. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the second half of the show, aka the Jam Session, Jam Szechuan. And we got Mark Rudin joining us from Utah, Salt Lake City, actually.
Yeah.
Are you ready to jam, Mark?
I'm ready to jam.
Shall we continue? All right, cool. I want to ask you about your studio, but before we go there, there was a video you did, because we were talking about plugins from a minute ago, where you were talking about these dirty dog pedal videos. And I've been seeing people talk about that. What is that, and why is that something you use, and is it pretty cool?
Totally. Safari pedals. You know where a great place to discover plugins is on Instagram, because they find you. They know what you're into, and all of a sudden you're just flipping through and you start seeing these things. And I was seeing these these Safari pedals, and I am just a sucker for a good interface, like a good looking, plugin. I just love, and I'm like, man, these things look so cool. And they let you demo them and everything. And so I had some demos, and I reached out to the plugin maker, and I was like, hey, these are so cool. Let me know if you ever want, to trade for a video. And so he's like, actually, I have a new one coming out, the Dirty Dog. I'll send you that if you want to make a video for it. And so that's why,
Nice.
And so, I love it. And again, it comes down to the functionality and the interface. Sometimes it's just nice to have something cool to look at while you're working.
What does it do? What does the Dirty Dog do?
Dirty Dog is really cool because it's like a crunchy reverb. It basically is a reverb and distortion in one. And so you can really dial in this really like old crunchy reverb sound that I love, and in that video I used it on bass first, which is like a sound that a lot of people don't like think about, but I associate it with some cool old recordings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like a little bit of reverb on a bass, on like especially like a woody sounding Hofner type, kind of dead sounding bass with a little reverb tail, but a little crunch as well. Like it's great, and I use all their plugins. They have one called Time Machine. You were asking me, how do I make things sound old? I mean, like this pedal, you just put it on and it's a compression, and it's got noise on it. A lot of these plugins that have noise on it, you got to be careful with, because they'll just
they'll bite you in the ass later.
and what I do is, if I want to use the noise, then I will make sure that I commit that. In Ableton, it's called freezing. You freeze, and I can't remember what else it's called, but like you like basically commit it to audio. And then if there's big sections where you're not playing, just cut it out, just make sure that it's only happening
So
when the instrument is hitting. Yeah.
Clever. So you can have the noise as part of the sound when it's going, but it's not there idling in between.
Yeah.
Because that's where the noise has really bit me in the ass on a production is I'll mix getting all the tones I want, hearing all the sounds, but then like I'll go to the beginning. And in the past, I've even done this where I've worked on a mix and printed it. And it wasn't till mastering even, or it wasn't till I like really cranked it up that I was like, oh crap, there's all this noise in the intro. Where's that coming from? And it had just turned out to be some plugin that had the noise button still on.
Yeah, I think it's super important to manage that. Even with guitars, you just get that normal noise floor from the pickups and all of that stuff. It's like sometimes you want that to help with the body of the sound of the overall track, but it's rare that you want more than one track doing that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose there are times where you're doing a rock band, a punk band thing, and you want to hear all the buzzes and the noises and everything, so it sounds legit. And when you do take the time to, trim the heads and tails of a song at a mix and really clean things up, it's pretty remarkable just how good some of your sounds will sound because they're not fighting and competing with all this other junk.
And like you said, then you get it mastered and it's just like, what is going on? If you have too much noise, it's just like, it's all going to come out in the mastering. And you really want to manage that before you send it to a mastering engineer.
Yeah. So then there's another video that you did where you were like, this is a Shruti box. And I was like, what is that? And so that like sent me on a goose chase on Amazon looking for those, and there are a lot available. Tell us what a Shruti box is and what that was all about.
Shruti box is basically they're from India and it's drone, and so it's a standard thing that anybody in India would get when they're learning music, because in India, in an Indian music, you learn, I think they're called rajas or something like that. And it's basically scales. It's like the pentatonic scale, but there's multiples of them. These 5-6 note scales that and it's really cool. And I learned about this when I was young. I went to work on a cruise ship after I dropped out of college and I needed some money. So I played trumpet on a cruise ship, and there was another guy there who had just come back from India. He had a flute with him and he had a Shruti box, and he sort of was like, and he just started showing me the different rajas. I think that's what they're called.
Raga.
Ragas, yes. Ragas is correct.
As in Spinal Tap, you don't want to go raga on us now, do you?
Yeah.
And
it's basically like...
This is great.
I love that reference. It's basically like taking like a pentatonic scale and saying, okay, you can play these 5 notes in any order and mix them up, and you work within this. And it was great. And so that's how I got introduced to the Shruti box. And I started using it to warm up my trumpet. Because it's sometimes with trumpet, you go through periods where you do this like long warm up, you do it on the mouthpiece and stuff. And I would just put it on and do a thing, usually as just a pitch center, Sometimes I put it on with my drum set and just jam to it just to have something going, and it acts as like a metronome because it has this kind of loop happening. But it's just a drone. It's just one note with overtones. You can hear all the different overtones coming out.
Like a sitar has all those drone strings.
Yeah.
Not the kind of drone that flies around your studio and accidentally takes your eye out.
Yeah. No, but like if you're practicing your sitar, it's in India, you would have your Shruti box there. You would tune it.
Yeah, so you can tune it. You can do different keys and notes, right? Have you ever used it in a production yet?
I have. Yeah. I just, what I do when I'm messing with stuff like that is I'll just play it. I'll just take my iPhone over and just record it, send it to my, airdrop it to my computer and drop it in, and then find a little loop sample of it. And so anytime it's the quickest way. It's like, oh, I wish I had a drone like an Indian sounding drone, well, it's right there, and I'll just turn on my Shruti box, and then I can, and yeah, I don't even bother to like do any fancy miking or anything. I'll just get it on my iPhone, because then again, it's like that's part of creating this unique sound. It's just like use your iPhone and drop it in, and that's how I would use it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love hearing stuff like that. And every once in a while, I remember to use my iPhone as part of my mic collection in the studio, and I'm always blown away with how cool it sounds. In fact, recently I was trying a fun trick, throwing way back to a friend of mine, Chuck Hatcher, who showed me this ages ago in the first studio I was in, where he said, hey, let's play solo the vocal and play it through the speakers. And then he just took a micro cassette recorder and moved it around the speaker and recorded it. And then we mixed that back into the music. We put that back in on the ADATs. And now you could do that with an iPhone. So I did some experiments where I like took drums and recorded it coming out of the speaker on the iPhone, and then flew that back into the session and blended it back in, and you get this cool sound. But the iPhone does this great, like, it's pretty damn hi-fi in a way, or it gets rid of the stuff you struggle to deal with in your mix anyway.
Yeah.
And it has this great compression on it. So it's a great trick for recording stuff.
Totally.
In the studio. I mean, you could use it as your only mic. I suppose you could do every single overdub on it and just keep flying it back into the session if you wanted to.
People do, and you definitely can. First time I saw it, like being used like that, was with one of the best producers I know. He was at that hotel I was mentioning earlier down in Mexico, and they just decided to spend most of their time writing in their room. And even though there was a whole recording studio there, they were more like comfortable just being in their suite. And every time they needed, like, I remember he just would run down, and there was a set of timbales down there, and he's like, "Oh, I just need a timbale fill." And they just, one guy was holding the iPhone. He's like, "Brah!" And then they went back up, and I listened to the record, and it just sounds so good, that timbale fill on there.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, let's see. So let's jump over to your studio and talk a little bit about that. Tell us about your studio. Are you joining us from the studio right now?
I am.
If so, what are you surrounded with? When you look around, what do you see?
Yes. So it's a shame that like I don't get 360 view on my webcam here, but because what you see behind me is a bookshelf, and I can even start with that. When I have two rooms. So when I moved into this house, and we moved here during the pandemic from Los Angeles. Before this, I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in LA. And one of the bedrooms was my studio. So I got really used to working in kind of a smaller room. And this room that I'm in right now is a perfect square. It's a small bedroom that I treated. And I, was like, okay, what am I going to do for diffusers in the back? And I've always admired people that had bookshelves as diffusers, because books and just a diffuser in the back of the room is really, it's not about having, foam or anything like that. It's about, you don't want things to be parallel, so you want to have as much rigidness as possible. And so that's what the bookshelf sort of does for me, is it creates that completely unparalleled surface that the sound just gets caught in and doesn't bounce back at me. And then so from there, going around the room, I have it treated all around my speakers. I can give you a little bit. I don't know if this helps.
Well, we won't see it on the podcast.
Okay, that's right.
You can describe it if you want.
Well, I have treatments that are hanging, and I'm just going to show you just a little, like, kind of glimmer of it. But you can
I'll try and describe it
how
too.
These are.
So it's like a panel that's sort of hanging by the wall
from the ceiling. I have it hanging from hooks and picture wire, so that it's suspended, because I wanted to create like a perfect shape around me. And I learned a lot about sound treatment from building the recording studio in Mexico. And I had a buddy of mine who's an expert come in and help me back in LA. And so I sort of recreated my room in LA out here. And so I have the panels in the proper spots that they would need to be, so that they're suspended so that they have that movement. They're not just stuck to the walls.
Right. So that might actually help. I know that for bass traps, sometimes they would do suspended sheets and suspended insulation sheets and things like that. And I think the same thing, because they can move at the lower frequencies a little bit.
Right.
It also helps soak up those frequencies.
Yes. So, and then, one of the tricks is that where you want your panels to the left and the right is basically where you would see the, I'm going to screw this up.
The reflection.
But your reflection, yes, exactly. And if you had a mirror on the left or the right, where you would see them. So I have it all set up like that. So I am treated well. I have sound clouds in a similar way right above me. And then I have a desk. I'm sitting up really high right now. I can almost stand up and be at the same level because I have one of these stealth chairs. I don't know if you know them. This is the best studio chair you can have because I was having a lot of issues with being too low. I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'1", and I just couldn't find a chair where I could stay comfortable sitting, and also sort of find that fine balance of sitting and standing, so that you don't, sitting's the new smoking thing, you don't want to
right.
Yeah. And so I'm up really high, and my desk I bought this desk from Pier 1 Imports, and I always liked it because I had screwed in all these hooks and things to hooks for my earphones and hooks for my I even have a hook for my trumpet sometimes, and everything. And I bought this stand-up unit that I put on top of it, and that also has these levels. So there's there's a spot for my keyboard, there's a spot for my MIDI controller, there's even a spot for my Pelonis speakers, which I guess I can move on. So I haven't changed desks to a proper studio desk because it wouldn't be at all the proper heights and everything like that.
Right,
I'm big on function, and
ergonomics is so crucial in a studio setting.
Absolutely.
And it's so quick to go if you're not careful, because you'll because if you start doing this stuff when you're younger too, when you're willing to hunch over all awkward and work for 2 hours, and then you get up and you're
yes,
why don't my arms work anymore?
No, and I'm not younger anymore, and I started experiencing, different pains and stuff like that from sitting too much, and posture issues and everything as I sit up straighter. But the desk also has the perfect place for my computer, the perfect place for my satellite, all these little components that I rely on. And I have a fairly simple setup otherwise. But speakers, I have, I just mentioned my Pelonis. My main speakers are Focal Twins, and I have the Focal Sub 1. So I feel that combination is just honestly, I don't think I'll ever have to change my speakers for the rest of my life.
Nice.
They're great. They're, on the level. I know a lot of, mixers that use this setup, at least the Twins. And they're just, I was introduced to Focals when I built the studio in Mexico, and I would just haven't ever thought about, another company since, because I just thought they were so incredible. It's that moment when you hear music differently than you've ever heard it, and
right.
The separation and everything. So
I've definitely had a few of those moments I can remember. I remember the first time I moved to Nashville and I got a job at a hi-fi store, and he unfortunately actually fired me after a week because he said, I'm sorry, I'd gotten the job saying I was moved here to go to recording school and I was way into this stuff. And after a week, he was like, I just thought you knew more than you did. But in payment, he actually let me trade for high-end speaker cables and RCA cables. Some of the stuff that people, kind of go poo-poo on because they think it's too woo-woo. But I took it home and I hooked up good cables on my stereo, and I listened probably to Kinda Blue, or one of the Miles Davis records that I already knew. And I was like, whoa, I've never heard the fingers on the strings of the upright bass before. This is cool.
Yeah. I remember the first song I listened to on Focal speakers was Paranoid Android, the Radiohead song, and I just was. It's like I was like on acid or something. Just like
Yeah,
the sounds
nice.
were all separated. Like I never. It just like you just. It was incredible.
I am massively impressed with Isotope Ozone. I've been mastering a lot of my records recently, and Ozone makes it so easy for me to get a fantastic sound. The mastering assistant will help you get started by measuring your track and suggesting all the settings you need for a professional result based on the genre and EQ curve of your choice. You can even reference a specific song if you want, using simple yet sophisticated modules like clarity, impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting. You simply adjust the settings to your own taste and it sounds incredible. And the magic of master rebalance means you can reach into your mix at the mastering stage and manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums. My bandmates are pretty demanding of my mixes, but now when I send off the masters for approval and get comments back like, holy bleep, pristine, damn good mastering, crystal clear, you're a wizard, finally I love my singing, and the drums and bass sound huge, well then I know I'm doing something right. So check out the newest Ozone, RX, and all the other great apps at isotope.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. So now you're in a small home studio space though. What have you learned about having speakers? I'm guessing those speakers could crank up pretty loud if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that it's useful to work that way, or do you tend to work at a low volume? Do you have any thoughts about that?
It's it took a long time, but I've been like on the journey to lower volumes like over the past, like 6 years. I remember because I saw something recently where they're talking about how like you turn like it sounds better when you turn it up, but you're not really getting a real representation of what it sounds like. Sometimes you just have it so loud because it's for some reason that effect makes you think that it's sounding better than it is, But I work on so much music now. I'm in here all day, every day, that I'm preserving my ears have become a big thing. My partner, when we first started living together, she'd come and be like, "It's too loud. What are you doing to yourself?" And ear fatigue is a big thing. And I really want to make sure that I'm giving myself the best, opportunity to make a good mix. So I don't want to be cutting out frequencies from my hearing by listening too loud. So I do I have an Apollo Twin, which is my sort of where I started. And I have 2 levels that I listen to it on. One is my final, listening level. And then otherwise, I usually keep it down at like 2 or 3 notches because I can hear everything. And I find I've just as I've been able to do that, because it's easier said than done to listen quietly,
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even call it quiet. I just call it at like a very moderate level, and you do get better mixes, better balanced mixes when you don't have it as loud.
I've been struck too by how listening loud can, at the beginning of maybe finding a sound, might inform me in a way that says like, okay, this sound feels right. Sometimes that's true. But sometimes I've also been like tracking guitar loud in the studio because I'm like, I gotta feel it, and then I might find a challenging part harmonically in a production, and there are times where I go like, hold on, let me turn everything way down and just sit down and play this overdub really quietly, and sometimes I'm like, whoa, it's so much easier, and I could immediately hear what the melody needed to be and which notes were conflicting and all that kind of stuff. So it is an interesting back and forth with those things. And that's just at the tracking stage.
Yeah. And that's just a process of finding your workflow, because with UAD, you have the console, which you can listen through in real time, and you can like if I'm recording horns or something like that, you can turn up the channel on there so you can hear yourself better. You don't have to turn up your headphones, but you can make it cut through better when you're tracking, and you can add, reverb that's not going to record into the track and things like that. And I just find that super useful because you absolutely have to hear yourself really well when you're playing, especially like a horn.
Any pitch instrument.
Yes. You want to be able to hear yourself.
A horn.
The horn you don't want to overblow.
Right.
That's the thing.
Yeah, it's similar to a voice, like a vocal, right?
Yeah.
Do you find?
It is, because especially when it comes to like range issues and things like that, like, it's very similar. Whereas like, if you're pushing really hard to try and get up there, you're gonna have issues and tone issues, and you're gonna have endurance issues and all kinds of issues and stuff like that. So you definitely want to have that real good monitoring level so that you can stay relaxed. And that again took years. I used to hate going into other people's studios and tracking horns because I didn't have a lot of control over it. And I would have to like take an ear off my headphone or something like that to do it. But now I'm really dialed in. Kind of moving along in the studio. I mentioned I have the Apollo Twin. I also have a Apollo 8XP. I also have a satellite. So I rely heavily on the UAD stuff. And I load up my my console. I use the Unison preamps. Not only that, but I'll put a compressor in the inserts, and I'll record it. I'll try and get the best signal I can using the compressors and the EQs that I have. So I don't have any analog compressors or EQs or anything like that. But, you can dial in sounds with the UAD stuff.
Yeah. It's cool to hear about your whole studio. And also when you're talking about the horns and getting your headphones right, and my mentioning the vocals, it reminded me that the experience of doing a horn part or any instrument, I wonder if it would be even true like doing a violin part, where you have to find the muscle comfort zone for the appropriate level to play the instrument. Mm-hmm. You have to find the pitch center and all that. I know in vocals, what I've discovered is that if you turn the music down low in your headphones, then your natural voice, your head voice, is actually loud enough that you're hearing that and you're referencing it. If you turn the music up really loud, then you're hearing your voice just through the mix in the headphones, and that can be your reference for what it sounds like. But there's this like middle ground where if your headphone volume and what the mic is sending back to you matches your own voice in that moment, it almost starts to cancel it out in a weird mm-hmm. way. And like, if you've ever noticed, if you flip the polarity on your microphone, your horn or your voice comes back sounding different.
Yeah.
Because like the low end can cancel. And just reminded that like how sensitive all these things are too.
Yeah.
What kind of balance you do.
Yeah. And then like, it takes a little while to figure that out, dealing with latency and stuff. That's why, again, I can't say enough good things about Apollo and UAD stuff, recording with zero latency, and at least what you're hearing, is without any latency, and it's great.
Speaking of which, did we hear the studio dog?
Yeah, you heard Blue.
Yeah, what do you got? Who are your studio dogs?
Restless. I got Blue and Lola in here. And,
right on.
Yeah. They're
right on. Daisy's my studio dog. She's 2 rooms away. She's not always quiet.
I won't keep them.
Well, let me ask you this question. So with these songs that you're doing, when there's a quality that needs to sound familiar, which seems on the one hand, it's sort of obvious in a sync world where it's like we need something that fits in with other things, but it's also, honestly, it can be really helpful in our own like creative, I'm the artist world where we're like, what kind of music should I make? Is this idea of starting with a reference track of some sort and letting it guide us in a production or in writing. So my question about that for you is like, how can we create a track that feels familiar without obviously copying something mm-hmm. else? And then do you ever actually just like load a song into a session and then go through and just sort of study what's going on with it?
Mm-hmm.
the beat and the drums and the sounds and the arrangement and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So to answer the first part, like, how do you not copy? I just trust that once I start on my path on, doing what I'm going to do, it's not going to sound the same. It's not going to be a copy. Once I sort of take it into my own hands and go from the reference to like, okay, now it's up to me to like make this thing sound good, play good parts and use good sounds and everything like that. It inherently will not sound exactly like the other song, and then especially once you start putting on lyrics and top line and all that stuff, then you really start to go away from it. And it's like a lot of times someone's like, oh, this sounds like this sounds like that, and it's like, that's fine, but it's like, this is a ripoff, like that I never worry about that, because I just know that it's naturally going to move into its own direction.
Right. And if you don't use the same lyrics and the exact same melody, you're going to be,
and then
you're not going to be directly ripping.
Yeah. And to answer your other part, I asked I'm lucky. I know some really, really great producers, that have done some incredible albums and records and stuff. And I asked, somewhat recently, started reaching out to them, because I was just at this point where I was like, you know what, I really just want to get better. I really just want to be better. I want to up my level as a producer and as a mixer and as a songwriter and all these things. And one guy, he said, try to copy a track exactly and take like a song that you love and see if you can like completely copy it. And so I did, and it was a really great, I spent a whole day just doing that. And it was a really excellent exercise. And I was able to use some of those sounds and just sort of import them into a new session and make a song out of it that was my own, and I just kind of learned a lot that way. And I think it's a great way to learn. It's a great way to sort of tell yourself like, this is possible, and you could then go from there and be like, all right, let me change the key, move everything up a third, and, keep this part and get rid of this part and add my own idea over this part and stuff, So I do that too,
Yeah, that's a cool idea. And my roommate, Matt Mahaffey, many years ago had his studio upstairs, and he'd gotten that advice from somebody. So I remember going up and he'd be up there like trying to figure out how to do some popular song and just do a copy version of it.
That dude's amazing.
It seemed like such a cool episode.
I saw him on that Epic Recording Studios, and I still.
Oh yeah, nice.
I wish I could have like an hour with that dude to ask him how he set some of these things up, because he was just like, I was blown away by that guy's studio. But anyway,
yeah. He's a monster. I actually thought when I was getting ready for this interview and I was talking to Rodger, I was like, Mark strikes me as a bit of a Matt Mahaffey.
Yeah.
Just like creating everything, making all these varieties of music.
If I could be doing what he's doing, yeah.
Speaking of which, let's pivot over to some questions that came in from none other than Rodger Allen Nichols, who has also been a guest on the show. First one is, and these come from Rodger. He says, in the way that music is consumed these days, everything is an ornament, yet we don't even know what the Christmas tree is. How do you navigate the music biz regarding how it's consumed? How does that affect what you do in the sync world?
What I found, I don't know if this answers that. That is that's quite the metaphorical question there.
Yeah.
When I first started doing sync, I was really pleased that I had found it, because I was like, wow, a lot of the music that works for sync is what I like to do. Like I love doing fun, up-tempo, funky stuff with horns, soulful stuff, fun, silly, kind of quirky stuff, and so it was like, you know what? Like, screw what's cool, quote unquote, in in the Spotify New Music Friday or whatever. It's like I'm doing fun music that I love that people um I think a lot of people steer away from because they're trying to like find what that, like viral sound is or something, and I don't, and it's like I kind of gave up caring about that and just been like, you know what, I'm gonna like really just make what I do sound good. And that being said, there was a process of like, how do I also make this sound modern? Because you don't want it to sound dated. That's like that's like the it's like the worst word in as a
Right.
producer can hear, is that this sounds dated. I hate, I just want to punch anybody that says that. But it's a reflection of, the truth, and that's the only reason why I get so upset, because like I know why did I do that? How do I make this sound, like it was made in 2023? And that's just experience, and being honest with yourself, in that sense, at the same time as like, yeah, maybe, that looks good on me, doesn't sound like what's in the top 10. That's my latest release.
Yeah.
But does it sound as good as something that was recorded, in modern day? And does it have like some, elements of what is, we're influenced by as producers in modern day,
So speaking of which, that your new release, one of the things that struck me was how you cleverly released, he, get ready for it. Here comes my new single video clips on Instagram and stuff like that. And they all just have this great dancing and everything.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's pretty impressive. Dude. That's some high-end video production. Maybe it was more clever than that. So how did you make your cool dancing Instagram videos for your upcoming release? And what things do you want to share with the rock stars about? Just like, let the world know about your music that's coming around the corner, and it's easier than you think, or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. It's all this stuff is takes time, and you know, posting on social media and putting yourself out there. I think it's like, yeah, it's easy. It's easier than like digging a ditch, but it's because it's not like physical labor, but there's something, that's inherently somewhat difficult about it. But um I've always just done the best I can, and not like, put too much pressure on it. And in like you asked specifically about the dance videos, and I just took advantage of um some cool things that I found on Adobe Stock. I'll just open the kimono here, and like,
Do it.
get yourself an Adobe Stock account. If you don't want to like dance yourself, like figure out where you can find some cool videos like that and explore. And then, I did learn a lot about video editing because I created a video series when I was working for El Gonzo. Um, I have Final Cut Pro. I have I have Canva. I have, all these great tools that are actually quite easy to use. I mean, if you can figure out how to work a DAW, you can figure out how to work these things. I find
Yeah.
video to be like much easier than dealing with audio, because there's just less things you can actually do,
Yeah.
so
Although you're very kind. I mean, I use Final Cut Pro all the time, and boy, does it piss me off.
yeah, because it doesn't act like audio, it's like
That's the weirdest
you
way
want
of
it to,
thinking about
yeah.
like what you do first and what you do at the end and stuff.
Yeah.
But no, that's a good takeaway. I mean, and we do love these like open the kimono tips. It's like, yo, just go get an Adobe, stock video clip subscription or something, and there's a million videos out there, and then just steal. You can borrow them, and there's your music video.
Yeah, it's not stealing. You pay for it, and
Right,
I
right.
invested in a few things. It's like I'm gonna put a song out. I started doing this last year. I started like, investing in, good art. And I didn't want, even though I can make a decent album cover on Canva or, something like that, which which I do, and I have nothing against. It's like, oh, I know some good artists. I'm gonna pay them to make my artwork because I really want to, like, you know, uh, find just ways of investing in my release and making it a little bit more special. Paying for Playlisters Club, which is just a way of getting it out there because there's I don't have a whole. I'm really glad that I've done all that, like the videos that I have, because you were able to learn a lot about me that way and stuff. But I don't really spend a lot of time these days doing that. I'm much more busy making music right now, and so
Right.
finding that balance can be difficult. And but I do, like, when the time comes, I will hunker down and take care of that. It's part of the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you just sort of like give yourself a little window? You just say for these 2 hours, I'm just focusing on Instagram videos and back to music and make
Yeah.
that part of your regular thing.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the way to do it. And for a while, I was trying to do a lot of videos like TikToks and on Instagram and stuff, and I just had to give myself a little bit of grace because I would get like so frustrated I wasn't getting the take right or something like that, and I'd spend more time than I wanted to on it and everything, and then.
Or worse yet, is you go back and look at the view count, and you're like, "There's only
oh yeah,
12
that's the other
people that
thing.
looked at this."
It can be very distracting. You're constantly looking at your phone to see how many people are looking at it, and I just don't. I'm trying to just stay in my own little happy bubble and not let things like affect me like that. But that said, it's like, oh, this is taking too long to set up a camera and do this and that. Let me just find an easier way to do it. And that's with those with That Looks Good on Me. It was like, that was the easier way. It was just like, oh, okay. I want like cool dancing behind this music. Like it really, I thought it was a great way to tease the music because it is like real funky, good dance music, and it's like
It is.
any good dance. Like I can't dance like this. I don't know anybody that can dance like this. Like, let me just see what's on the internet and just put my song behind it, and it's that easy, and then do some
So now,
titling.
if you were going to do one for your Tequila Nights music release, what sort of, you would like find some dusty old Western
exactly.
clips?
I would find some dusty old Western clips. Exactly.
That's great.
I'm about to set a new release of a song called Trumpets, which is sort of like that. I mean, it's got this, you can look out for it. I'll be releasing it in December. I haven't even announced it yet. And
it'll be already out.
It'll be already out, yeah. And when you listen to this, my song Trumpets, and you'll see there'll be some imagery, that I pull up around that. And I just, I'm going to do something, I'm not going to do nothing when it comes to promoting the music.
Well, we'll have clips to all that, links to that rather in the show notes, Rockstar, so you can go check out Instagram and all that. Do you ever feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take you years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. Quote, "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process that I've ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, but condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session." Close quote. Look, I'm so confident that this will take your mixes to the next level that if you can't get a killer mix within 30 days, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the Ultimate Snare Mixing Trick. And I'll see you at the front row table of the Grammys. Cheers. The song, the recent one, That Looks Good on Me, which is a great dance track, which is why the dance videos work so well too. A lot of great horns on there and horn arrangements. And so I'll pivot back to the next of Rodger's questions, which is, as a songwriter, how does that influence your horn arrangements? And then I want to reverse that and say, as a horn player and arranger, how does that influence your songwriting?
Yeah. Horns are, it's amazing the impression they make on people, especially non-horn players, especially like when you're working with like producers who don't get to work with horns a lot and everything like that. It's like, you don't got to do much. I always try and keep it nice and simple. I try not to overthink it. This is just talking about horn arranging. I prefer, and I do a lot of horn sessions too. So I do a lot of like remote, like where people will send me their records and do the horns. And it's like, I always say like, wait until you got all the vocals tracked so that I can work around them. Because I mean, it's great to work around vocals. And sometimes it's, like in the case of That Looks Good on Me, I think that horn break was one of the first things like we did during the session. I was working remotely with those guys, and I don't know, maybe I can't even remember. I think maybe even like Kong like sang it, and I'm like, that should be the horn part, and I just like, let me track that real quick, and I just did it real quick. I tracked it, and then we had that there, and we knew that was going to be the horn break, and it's a little different every time. And then, in terms of the opposite way, like how being a horn player affects my songwriting, I learned early on doing horn sessions that horns don't work on every song, and even when you do a horn, like I would do horn sessions for, and really be excited about being on the record, but it wouldn't make the final cut. We're talking about like major label stuff, maybe, that like had to make it past the A&R guy and the vice president of the label and all these things. And it's like, the horns didn't make it. It's, I think it's kind of hard to get horns on most records, and to make them work on most records. And that's why you don't hear it on every song. You don't hear it on a lot of popular music. I just happen to make the type of music that horns work on often.
Right. Well, like the dance track, the Uptown Funk kind of thing.
Exactly.
That's obvious. The soul, the punching horns. And it's funny, I think about horns. Horns are the original electric guitar in a way too, because tonally they're just cut right through if you want them to. They've got the upper harmonics and the tone.
Yeah.
That guitars, stepped in and started filling up. And you also have the spaghetti Western version with the trumpet, and that was a little bit more like trumpet ensemble, or like what horns you play? Trumpet, trombone, sax, and flute.
Yes.
So what combination, if you wanted to give us, if you pretend we're like a 5-year-old kid, like, what do you play on what music?
Yeah.
How would you suggest that those instruments are useful in different?
Yeah. I mean, it's about knowing your genres, like you brought up spaghetti Western, and it wasn't really spaghetti Western. I was thinking like Tex-Mex, so
Nice.
When I was making that. And so where that led me is like, what do the horns sound like in Mexico, and banda?
Yeah.
There's no
Right.
saxophone. It's all brass. It's all like this sort of like overblowing almost, like you want to have this real brassy tone. And so that, I think I just did trumpet and trombone on that. And I always double or quadruple, to make it sound bigger. The horns, for most cases.
In Nashville, there's a great Mexican population here. And one time I went with a buddy and we went to a Mexican restaurant on a Friday night, and it was literally their like Tex-Mex open night, mic night. And so there was a band on stage, and I can't remember if violins showed up too, but I remember a lot of trumpets and brass instruments kept showing up, and more people just joined in, and it was the craziest like collection of brass instruments that like tuning was like anything goes kind of. But it was like a sound I've never heard before, and I was so blown away by it. But just, I don't know, I'm digressing.
Yeah.
But just, you talking about the layering the brass.
And, sometimes it's just like trumpet and saxophone works. I think it's like knowing your genres, knowing like, like a full horn section with every horn is going to be too much for this. It might be simpler with just these two. You mentioned like guitar, trumpet being the original guitar. That looks good on me. I worked with a co-producer who he did all the guitars on it, and he doubled the horns. If you listen to it, there's a guitar doing the horn part, and it's a cool trick. I do that sometimes with organ, or guitar. It's a very cool trick. Double the horn parts with an instrument that's not the horns. And it sounds pretty cool.
And also, I think it's good for us to know if we're curious about using horns on records and how does that work. I mean, I think if you're you and you know what it's supposed to be, it's a different experience than if you're used to making rock music and you're like, oh, let's put some horns on this, and you haven't really thought it through. And I've been there. Trust me, I've like worn a horn player out in the studio for 2 hours of doing overdubs with no arrangement whatsoever. And I learned things like, oh, there's something called embouchure.
Yeah.
And it goes away after a little while,
Yeah. It's like funny when I'm working with someone who's like never worked with horns. Like sometimes they just think you could do anything, Can you go? Exactly. Can you go wappa diddy boppa do? And it's like no. Like there's limits on this thing, It's not like a sound effect maker, It's like, and that's where like sort of like they'll be like, all right, like this is what I'm trying to get at. If it works on the horn, then it works. If not, you're the expert. Just do what is going to sound good and work well with the track. Yeah.
So what is it? What horns make up a section for, your new tune?
For That Looks Good on Me?
That Looks Good on Me, yeah.
I think that's trumpet, trombone, saxophone. May or may not be flute on that too. Sometimes.
How useful? And when you say sax, are you playing multiple saxophones, or are you sticking to tenor
sax? It's I do everything on tenor sax. I find that I can get away with a lot with the tenor sax because it's right in the middle. You could play. If you go down in the low register, you can almost do bari sax stuff. You play in the upper register, you could do alto sax stuff. So I'll do like. A lot of times I'll record the tenor sax in octaves, and it just sounds like a full saxophone ensemble,
And bari sax is such a cool sound, but it's very distinct, probably for certain styles of production, I imagine. When you get down in that range, do you actually run the risk of fighting with your bass parts and stuff?
Not so much. I think the harmonics that you create with a horn, are so different than what is coming out of like any bass instrument, whether it be like a synth or an actual like electric bass or anything like that, that you don't have to worry about that too much. And it's very rare that you have them even playing like similar parts or at the same time. I mean, with the bari sax, it's always like if you're doing like a soul song, it never gets old. Just that bottom, you just have that, right. And I'll just I'll just record it on the tenor and pitch it down, a little bit to get if it's below the range of the tenor sax. Ableton has such great algorithms for doing that you can do it without losing any of the quality of the sound.
Wow, so you've trained yourself to go down to the lowest note on the sax, even though it's completely the wrong note for the song. Knowing that you can then just drag it down afterwards. And
if you were like standing here while I'm tracking it, you'd be like, dude, you're playing the wrong notes. It's like, no, it's like bigger picture stuff, dude.
That's hilarious. Okay. And then, it's funny. I think about, I wanted to make a comment about how horns, have this ability to punch through music and speak and then wait their turn. And that's certainly like for the punchier dance kind of music. But then I was like, yeah, but Glenn Miller, now that's like horns, they're almost like organ chords or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be like an ensemble of saxophones, right?
Yes. So like I came up in big bands, and with the big band, it's like that. It's like a small orchestra, whereas like the strings will will do this part so that the brass can come in and do this part, and they can kind of have interplay and stuff and things like that. And so I picked up a lot of those arranging ideas from things like that. But in general, especially like in like a more of like a pop type song, or like just like a when you're not doing something like intricate like jazz or classical, or big arrangements or something like that, unison sounds great. It works best, if
Yeah.
like that's what, you listen to, that looks good on me. It's all just unison. I didn't have to overthink it. Oh, what's a good harmony for this or anything like that. It's just played.
Right.
And the blend of all the instruments together creates just this fat horn section. You don't need the harmonies and stuff. That'll take away from it.
Right. So if we're going to use the guitar analogy, rock stars, think punchy melodic line on a fuzz guitar. One of the first quick things you learn about fuzz guitars is the harmonies, don't necessarily work anymore. You got to just stick to unison lines to get a really great fuzz tone to cut through.
Yes.
Because it'll turn into a mess. These questions come from Rodger again. How do you create music for sync without losing your own musical integrity and sound like you're having a good time?
That's again kind of going back to, I feel like when I discovered sync and the whole idea of doing it, it became like, it was like a light bulb. It was like a happy moment for me, because it wasn't a compromise. It was like, oh, like I said, we were trying to do like something that sounded like Uptown Funk, and I love nothing more than fun, funky, disco-y, up-tempo, exciting music. So I felt like, in one sense, what I do best naturally is what works well in a lot of scenarios for sync. I've had my most success, like monetarily, with soul funk music, for the most part.
Now, have you, on the opposite end of the spectrum, have you come to know people who are making, totally different stylistic music from you, that it just simply, they find their own niche in sync music because that people think of them as the dark Dracula
right
music creator or whatever?
Not so much. Like I think that you do have to know what you're doing, and you have to do your homework. And it's not saying that those are the only styles that work, because they're definitely not. There's definitely some parts of sync that you hear used a lot that I know I can't do that great, and I try to. And when you try, you get somewhere, you get something. It may not be exactly the what you're trying to get to, but it's going to be something, and it will be, unique and different because you tried, you put your best foot forward and you gave it your best shot. But I do find that, like, working with other people, for example, they may not want to put their artist name on the song, because it sounds so different from what they do as an artist. And what they do as an artist, like, just doesn't seem to go in sync,
Right. It'd be like mixing brands.
Exactly. And that's totally understandable. And that's why I started releasing music as Mark Rudin, because I was like, you go through, and even my last song is featuring Kong, and it's like, all right, if this isn't going to be a Kong song, at least, like, I mean, I have so much music that I make that I do want to share it. I don't want it all to just be sitting in my, catalog being pitched. And if it never gets placed, no one's ever going to hear it. I started to realize like, oh, I am the artist. I mean, I'm the one
Right.
that's has really spent the most time crafting this, and in a lot of ways, as the producer, even just put the thing together and initiated the sessions and finished the song and all that, and co-wrote it, and I do a lot of lyrics, a lot more than probably people would think, so I was just like, yeah, you know what? Like, that's fine, and if it's not for you, then, maybe you'll be a featured artist or, or whatever, I'll release it just under my name, and the artist will be okay with that too, or whoever I'm
Right. Because
working
if
with.
you weren't putting the music out as an artist under your name, then your music runs the risk of just sitting on a shelf somewhere
Yeah.
and never being heard because it didn't get picked for something.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Okay. So here's another question from Raj. In 5 years, this is the biggie, the big doozy. In 5 years, where do you see people writing for sync, and how will AI knock the low-hanging fruit out of the park? Another great mixed metaphor.
Mhm.
And how does the industry try to make money from the writers? It's a little bit of a two-parter.
Yeah. So I think that there's always going to be like any like good brand that is really doing well and is willing to um invest in marketing is going to pay for music. You know, any good director for film and TV is going to not want to compromise and is going to pay for authentic human made music, like even in 5 years. Like um AI, it I'm already using AI. I use Gullfoss plugin. I use Ozone 11, and I use their mix assistant and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
and that's fine. It's always a tool. I use AI to write bios. I mean, like, the bio you read today, I like, sort of like worked on it in collaboration with ChatGTP. It's
That's
like,
hilarious. Yeah, it's
just
good.
because I knew, like, it's a tool, and I'm not concerned about it putting me out of the job, especially because because of my niche as a horn player. Like, it just it, it's just, about, I do think about this a lot, and I think like, okay, I need to know how to use it. I need to know how to collaborate with it and use it to help me, and all of those things. But I think that the sync music industry is still going to be there. There's still going to be a need for it, especially on the, because like I said, I do custom work too. There's regular licensing, there's custom, and there's library. And in the custom world, they are sending you their commercial with no music on it. And they're like, this is what we're looking for. And then they're going to want to revise it and mold it into exactly what they want. And they're not going to be able to do that. Like, AI isn't going to be that good. It never will.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So when you work on custom tracks, Rockstars, takeaway is don't record it on analog tape.
No. I've done customs where I was 56 revisions in,
Wow.
Yeah, and it's tough because you're working with and this, I guess this kind of starts to answer your question of how the industry, did you say how was the industry gonna
Yeah. How does the industry try to make money from what you write? I mean, is there,
yeah.
I think that was in the context of sometimes they try and get their grubby hands into
Yeah.
things that belong to you.
What's
possibly.
nice is that I'm not dealing with the music industry ever, like, yeah, I'm releasing songs on digital platforms, but I don't expect much, in terms of like uh you know, making a living off of that or something. I make my living in licensing and in being the guy that people will come to when they need specific music for what they're looking for what they're doing. And so the industry that's making money off me is not the music industry, it's the advertising industry or the TV industry, or something like that. And in the ad world, like I said, they're gonna like use and abuse the heck out of me, and make me do 56 revisions until they're happy. And these aren't always like music people. They don't know how to, communicate musically what they want. It's like they want it to sound more orange,
Right,
stuff like that. And you have to. And part of being a professional is keeping your cool, and knowing that, like, okay, maybe that just means they want a shaker, right there, or they want a clap, or something, and you start to kind of learn to translate these things on your own.
This podcast is proud to present Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I master my own records using nothing but plugins. Plus, I take you into a world-class mastering studio, Sterling Sound, to meet with Ryan Smith and hear how he professionally mastered my record, Skadoosh, for release to streaming platforms. That's the music you hear on this podcast, Rockstars. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free mixing course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads for you to practice mixing and even upload to your website if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy to get started now. Now, one of the things you mentioned is libraries. In my experience, I have made some videos for YouTube and I discover things like, oh, YouTube has a free music library where you can go choose music to add to your video that will be allowed. And then you notice that there are content creators there whose names will show up and you'd be like, oh, there's people, it makes you think, oh, I guess there's people who make this as part of their thing, making music for these libraries. And then more recently, I started using one called Epidemic Sound. And you mentioned a few too, I think earlier. And so there seems to be like a real opportunity to just make a bunch of fun instrumental music in styles in library music. Do you have any suggestions for rockstars listening who might, want to explore that? Maybe there's some of us who don't feel like lyricists, but we feel like we got a million ideas for making stylistic tracks.
Absolutely. So yeah, even in the sync world, I recently went independent this year, and I started seeing more of the searches that the music supervisors were sending out, and I saw a lot of need for like instrumental music, like a lot, like it's almost half the time they're just looking for instrumentals. So that just, sorry, a slight digression, but in terms of the library stuff, there is a specific form, and I was lucky enough to have someone kind of help train me to do it. And you have to understand that you're creating music essentially for dialogue to be over, but it can't be boring either. It has to progress. Every section has to sound different. There has to be, maybe some kind of bridge or some kind of key change, chord change in it, so that it's not just, monotonous music. A lot of people think that they can get away with that, but you can't, and I'm currently working on a library order of 150 songs,
Wow.
and it's a lot of work. It's a lot to be creative every day like that. I have to crank out 2 songs a day to keep up with the schedule. Um, and what I would say, and this is what I'm going to do, is I've always there's those times where you're like uh, you maybe don't know what to do with yourself, but you want to make music, make an instrumental track, make it as compelling and as good as you can, and just keep making them. Because one day you may be able to get yourself into a library order, and you'll already have some done, or you'll be able to just you go back to the session and shift them so that they do work for that specific order. I do a lot of starter tracks, so when I'm doing a session, because I work a lot on Zoom, like I'll send, which will be like, the drum thing and a bass part and, guitar, sometimes some horns, maybe sometimes it'll be arranged a verse chorus, but not like completely finished, but just so I have a starting point when I'm working on a song with a collaborator or something like that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Like a
and
song
those
sketch
ones
idea.
that don't get used, I can turn into an instrumental track sometimes, or things like that. It's like what I'm going to do after I'm done with this 150 songs is prepare for the next one that comes. Even though I don't know when the next order is coming in, I'm going to keep making library music, because sometimes you make some really cool stuff that you're like, wow, I should actually make this into a song. I should find a collaborator and write something over this, um,
Nice.
and mold this into a finished song, a full song. And it's always, when you're in this world, when you're in licensing, when you're in library, even custom work. I mean, even though it's a little less that you're gonna like have something that's already started when you're working on a custom. It's it you can never have enough material. It's somewhat of a numbers game. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for the rock stars about how to keep this stuff organized so that you know where to find it and it can be top of mind when you need it?
Yeah, keep it organized. Have a starter folder, have a back burner folder, have like really organize your stuff, title it, have an instrumentals folder, have like your A level stuff, your B level stuff that, I actually, that's my back burners folder. I keep it, I don't go back to it but sometimes you do want to check your back burner stuff and be like, oh, okay, this isn't as bad as I thought it was, and it could work. Now it's going to work, and stuff. So I mean, it's not rocket science. I have iCloud, and I, keep everything in certain folders, and I mean, I have a good enough memory where I can kind of remember, oh, I started something similar to that. Let me go find that session, um, and back everything up, and keep an external hard drive and keep those same folders on that drive, and everything, and always have access to everything you've ever worked on. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, so we're about done here, but let me ask you this question. Do you have any more fun favorite software kind of tools that you want to just give a shout out to? Anything recent you're just checking out, excited about? Plugins, software instruments. I mean, you didn't necessarily talk about your favorite instrument sources.
Yeah. Well, so one of the best investments I ever got was my Kemper, which it just like changed my life, because before that I was messing with like Guitar Rig and stuff, which is all great, and I still use it even after. But like having having great sources where you don't even need plugins is so much more valuable than any plugin collection. So like the Kemper to me is worth 1,000 plugins because it is just such a great tool. And then same with I have a Nord Electro 4 here, and a lot of my music has organs in it. It's like I find an organ, a well-played organ part can really uplift the final chorus or something like that. And doing that in MIDI is is hard because the way you want to play the organ is you want to move the drawbars as it's playing and stuff like that. You want to get that movement and stuff. So I like having the drawbars there and to touch. But that's hardware stuff. I'm always like, I have guitars and stuff like that I play. I got a shaker right here. I got a tambourine right here because it's like, yeah, you can go on Splice and keep looking for tambourines, but it's like, dude, just play what you want to play. It's like, but like I use the Roland Cloud stuff. I know it's not the cheapest, but it sounds incredible because I don't have a bunch of synths around. But so I don't have a Juno, I don't have a DX7, I don't have like a Moog and all these things. I don't even have room for it. Nor do I want to like spend all my money on this stuff. So I find that that stuff sounds really good. Like the Roland Cloud Juno 106 is probably my most used soft synth. I've like 3 sounds that I use on it that I can mess with the cutoff and use it in different ways. And then probably my most used plugin for production is called I don't want to mess up this recording, but Shaperbox.
Oh, yep. This for sidechain compression kind of
everything. I wanted to, for the longest time, I was trying to figure out how do I do that gated guitar thing where it's like doing like doing like cool like 16th notes on the guitar gated, and it's like I'm messing with gates and everything like that. I finally found a way to do it with Shaperbox that's just like you can't miss, and I can create that.
Do you set
sound.
that up where you hear it? Do you set that up where you hear it while you're recording the guitar, or you play the guitar and then do it as a mix?
Actually, I will play the guitar but knowing that I'm going to do that to the sound. So like, let's say I want, that to be part of the bed of the track, that sort of 16th note gated guitar thing that's happening, I'll just do whole notes on the guitar, make them sound as good and clean as I possibly can. And then mess with it afterwards with Shaperbox. And not only can I get that gated effect, but I can make it pan, and move. And I can add a distortion along with the gate that will like trigger, and you can go through all these sounds. It's an incredible plugin. It's for production. It's one of the most useful plugins you can have. I would suggest that highly for anybody to get. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let me go to our closing question here, Mark. This one is hypothetical, and we're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back and find that young Mark who's just landed in Mexico and he's building his first studio, or maybe you go back further than that, and you say, hey, I've come back in time to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to become a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice do you feel like you'd like to go back and give yourself if you could?
What comes to mind is somebody I used to work with. He said, and I still think about it all the time. He said, everything works all the time. It's like kind of true. I used to spend, when I first started trying to produce and mix, I would spend so much time trying to get that kick drum to sound so good before I even wrote the song, And I realized that, like, yes, it's, there's other ways to find a good sounding kick drum, than spending hours on like something that isn't working, that doesn't, trying to mold it into what you want. But like, like, if you can't play a part perfectly, play it how you can play it and make that work, because everything can work. It's like, it doesn't have to be, like, especially because I wasn't trained as a guitar player, but I do a lot of guitar in my music. And when I can't do something, it's like, I'll simplify it and I'll make that work, And so it's like, everything can work. You can always make something work. And, I kind of knew that back then, but I wish I like stressed a little bit less on, worrying about whether I was gonna be able to like rise to the occasion or something like that. It's like, like it's a lot simpler. You can be relaxed. You can do your best, and it's probably gonna be really good.
Well, it sort of reminds me of working with session musicians here. And sometimes, a guitarist would come into play on a song and they do a part and I'll hear them just like play these really simple chords. And I might have thought as the engineer, God, that's so simple. Can't they could play better than that. But then later on I might be the guitarist myself and I go down that long road of starting out with something that's way too complicated and way too busy
Yeah.
until finally I go down to the simplest thing. And I'm like, oh, that's why the chords were used, because the chords just really work in this production. They didn't need to be anything else.
Yeah, yeah, and you make that work, and yeah, and I just to tell myself just like if you're trying your best and you're being honest with yourself, then it's good. It's good,
Yeah.
like yeah.
Well, dude, thank you so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars with us. Totally a pleasure to meet you and hang out with you for this podcast. Please let the rock stars know where can they go find out more about you if they want to check out your work. If they've, I don't know, maybe they've got an amazing song started and they need to figure out what to do next. I don't know. Where do you want people to check you out?
Yeah, for sure. Go to my website, markrudinmusic.com. That's where you can, have access to like all my socials and follow me on Spotify. I'm always releasing music. Mark Rudin on Spotify. You can email me, markrudinmusic@gmail.com anytime. If you want horns on your song, if you just want to like talk, I'm always down to like set up a hang, a Zoom hang or whatever. If you want to collaborate, it's easy to just be like, hey, yeah, let's make one. Let's make a song. Why not?
Hey, maybe they're making movies and they just need great music.
Yeah. So you can reach out to me, directly on my Gmail, markrudinmusic@gmail.com. Go to my website, Instagram, Mark Rudin. Everything is Mark Rudin. And really like go listen to the music on Spotify. That's that helps a lot. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, sure. And then Rockstars, because we know, of course, you're listening right now and can't read. MarkRudin.
That's right.
So now you got it. Now you got it lodged in your memory. Mark, what a pleasure hanging out with you, dude. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. Rockstars, thanks for taking time to listen and hang with us. And Mark, I look forward to meeting you in person. See you around the studio.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
All right, dude. Pleasure.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible. Lewitt, Grace Design, Atom Audio, Native Instruments, and Isotope. And remember, at isotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support the show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.